We'll be kicking off this session with the talk by Karl Floersch. Karl is a crypto economist and scalability expert. He's currently CTO of Optimism and previously an Ethereum Foundation core researcher. Karl will be describing a very interesting experiment, discussing the mechanisms, results, and learnings of Optimism's first retroactive public goods award. Welcome, Karl.
Why, hello. Optimistic Ethereum is a layer 2 scaling solution. It's basically Ethereum on layer 2. But there's a side of scaling Ethereum that doesn't just correspond to the, nitty-gritty implementation. It actually has more to do with the incentives and the value that is being generated on that network and where that value is going. Is it going to build public goods software? So, okay, Optimism PBC. I work at Optimism PBC. PBC stands for Public Benefit Corporation. And what that means is instead of just being a normal corporation, we have a public charter. And that charter is to enshrine fair access to public goods on the internet using open source software. That means that we are building open source software so that public goods are built in perpetuity on the internet so that we have good public infrastructure that we can use as internet citizens, metaverse citizens. Okay, so table of contents. We got a lot to cover, so I got to go fast. However, start off with the public goods problem. So what are we trying to do? What is a public good? Why are we not getting it funded? Then how we can solve that, which is retroactive public goods funding. And finally, we'll talk about an actual experiment that we did last month where we gave away $1 million to fund public goods retroactively. We'll talk about what that means. So first, what's a public good? Let's use the example of open source software, as that's a classic, quote, public good. So a good, it is a good, a thing that is, one, non-excludable. That means that if I share my open source software with the world, then everyone has access to it. It's not exclusive, right? And additionally, it's non-rivalrous. That means that if someone reads and understands the code that I write, it doesn't exclude someone else, or it doesn't mean that someone else can't also read that same code and get the same, spark from it. Unlike an apple, right, where you eat the apple and no one else can eat that apple. That would be a private good, for context. The problem is that there's no business model for public goods. Why? Well, it's because there's no way to monetize a public good traditionally through, for instance, holding it back so that someone, I'm selling you a Starbucks coffee and, you give me money, I give you the Starbucks coffee. That doesn't quite work in this area in open source software, as we all know. And so no business model means no investors, and oftentimes means no stake in the game, and you also don't get a big payout, no exit. There's no driving force that is monetary that expresses the actual value that people are creating, which is a big problem. And guess why this is a really big problem for us? Well, Ethereum core infrastructure is all open source. And so there is not nearly enough investment in Ethereum core infrastructure when compared to other parts of the Ethereum ecosystem. And so that is why this issue is so close to our hearts. But it is not just an issue for Ethereum core infrastructure. It is an issue for public goods on the internet generally. Very bad, very sad. Okay, so no business model, let's knock it out the park. We can add a business model to and that business model is using retroactive public goods funding. So let's talk about what that means, right? We're on next section. So a few months ago, Vitalik kind of was like, there's this retroactive public goods funding idea that I've been, pondering a bit. And then it's just, it's infected my brain. It's infected, I think, a number of other brains as well. It's a quite infectious meme. But before we define what retroactive public goods funding is, let's define what it is not. So it is not a traditional grants program. What does a traditional grants program really do? Well, okay, a traditional grants program, they have some ecosystem, let's say a public park, right? They're trying to make their park the best park it can possibly be, right? Oh man, gosh, this park is going up and to the right. And so then we've got these builders, and these builders, they're like, oh yeah, I like this public park. I want to build for this public park. And they will propose ideas to the grants giving organization. They'll say, hey, I want to build a slide, or hey, I want to build a swing set. And the grants giving organization will, think real hard and then pick one that it wants to fund, right? They are making a decision about what is best for the park. Okay, so they pick out the slide is best for the park, send some money. The builder uses that money to, build the slide, and boom, now we've got a slide. Oh, okay. But what happens if the slide is not actually what people want, right? No one's using the slide. How did the grants giving organization really know how to design, kind of centrally design the park, this ecosystem that is much more of an emergent and natural phenomenon? It's just a really hard problem. And so the grants giving org is trying to do the right thing, but maybe the swing is what everyone really wanted. How would they know? And so we get the sad outcome. Okay, so what's wrong with this picture, right? What can we do a little bit better? Well, the grants giving organization is making judgments about how to invest money, right? Where to put what public goods are actually required. This is not necessarily the best thing that the grants giving organization is, suited for. Let's flip that on its head. Instead, let's replace the grants giving organization with something we call the results oracle. So the results oracle, instead of funding future work, what it does is it instead funds past contributions, things that have already happened, people that have already built great things that have demonstrated their value to the community. Instead, give money back to those people retroactively, right? That's it. So the way that this works, high level, is the results oracle, of course, needs a goal. The goal can be very simple. In fact, it probably should be. Make the ecosystem the best, most vibrant, most attractive place possible. That's a great goal. And then you say, okay, the results oracle will measure the progress towards that goal. We got the builders just like before, but instead of the results oracle giving these proactive funding, the builders just start building. They start creating their, open source projects or, their tools or whatever it is, right? And we get closer to that really incredible goal of, having this vibrant ecosystem. Then the results oracle says, okay, we've definitely gotten closer to that goal. Let's pay out the people who got us there, right? Who actually contributed to our mission. And those people get paid out. And this process repeats. The builders build what they think is going to add the most value on their own accord. We get closer to the goal, and the results oracle pays out the contributions. That is, at a core, the big flip that happens between proactive funding and retroactive public goods funding. So let's look at that more generally. So we've got the proactive side and the retroactive side. And the proactive side is deciding what needs to be built and then top-down dictating what needs to be built. As opposed to the retroactive side, we've got the builders and the community members deciding what needs to be built, and that kind of percolating up to the results oracle, which then funds those builders and rewards them for their great contributions. So, proactive, top down, retroactive, bottom up. Okay, simple. But now, this begs the question. If everyone's getting paid after they've built something, how do they get paid while they're building it? Good question. Well, thankfully, we've got markets. That's a market opportunity, folks. How do they get funding to bootstrap their venture? Well, something venture capital, maybe? Anyway, well, just as big exits incentivize investment in startups, we have retroactive rewards incentivize investment in public goods. And this investment can be targeted and smart and intelligent. So not top down like a grants giving organization. So we've actually created a multi-sided marketplace where the results oracle and developers exist, but also investors. And developers get an idea, pitch it to their investors. The investors invest, give some money. The developers implement the idea, and the results oracle pays out everyone who is involved, right? This is literally how things get built all the time. And we're just trying to do the same thing for public goods. Okay. And of course, we get great market dynamics where poor projects or investors are weeded out. And, you know, we love everyone, but you know, anyway, we'll give them consolation prizes, participation trophies. Okay. So proactive versus retroactive. We've got the complete picture where the investors right down here are actually providing the seed funding that ends up creating a situation where the results oracle is able to give a reward or an exit to the open source public good startup. So from idea, right, the developer, investors, results oracle, to exit, we've rewarded the projects and we build a healthy ecosystem. Hallelujah, right? You know, no business model, get out of here. And, you know, we scale Ethereum because all of these are public goods and great. Oh, but wait a second. You know, it's not that easy. The results oracle is non-trivial to implement. So we're going to have to perform some experiments to figure out how do we actually determine what projects have made a significant contribution. And the best way to do that is through experimentation. What do? Well, experiment number 1, we last month gave away $1 million to fund public goods retroactively. We did this by electing 24 badge holders, and all those badge holders would determine who to give the money to. Now, notably, this $1 million comes from the profits that Optimism PBC creates. Because guess what? Optimism PBC we've said, we are not going to take any profits. We are going to invest all of our profits in public goods. Boom. So why badge holders? What is a badge holder? A badge holder is not a token holder, right? Badge holder, you can't transfer your badge. You're just stuck with it. The reason why we're doing these badges is because we want to innovate in governance, right? We want to come up with a system that really effectively distributes these retroactive rewards. So there were 3 phases to the experiment. First phase, nominations. Then we had a voting phase, and then payments. And so let's go over each one of them. But before we even started the project, we created a badge holder manual, which is essentially a constitution that the badge holders would follow to retroactively, to do their voting, right? This is their kind of terms of service, some sense. The highlights were, first, we need to fund public goods. It's pretty self-evident. Secondly, we need to fund them retroactively. This is self-evident. However, it is non-trivial, as we found out. Thirdly, it starts with optimistic Ethereum, but we expand outwards. Now, notably, the first question we got asked was, optimistic Ethereum, what about Ethereum public goods? Well, the whole point of optimistic Ethereum is that it is one-to-one with Ethereum, right? It is Ethereum. We're trying to merge as much as possible. So fund Ethereum public goods? Well, that's optimistic Ethereum public goods. These are one and the same. So that is kind of how that works. Now, notably, also, we wanted to make sure that badge holders did not vote with any conflicts of interest, right? That is critical and also non-trivial. And also, all communication would be publicly viewable. That means that all communication was done in Discord, public Discord, in Twitter, public Twitter, obviously, and also in public calls, which we had 2 of them, which we actually didn't plan up ahead. But we'll talk about all of these things momentarily. So first off, let's talk about nominations. This happened about, I think a month and 2 weeks ago, something like that. Okay, phase 1, nominations. First, 3-week-long process. This is majority of the time was spent on nominations. We got some really good nominations with a lot of detail, thought. So shout out to all the community members who provided these nominations. That was awesome. In fact, we got so many nominations that we broke the quadratic.co, by the way, great, shout out to Gitcoin for funding it, for making that site, website. So we had to, fix it. We got 78 nominations that were really quality. We had to weed out, around 20 of them. Conflicts of interest. Well, almost immediately, one of the hypotheses we wanted to test was, okay, what are we going to do about these conflicts of interest? Okay, we have 24 badge holders. What are we going to do? Well, I said, hey, I want to nominate Proto. And Proto was like, hey, no thanks. I'm a badge holder. Let's keep this simple. Let's, I do too much with optimistic Ethereum already. Like, I don't know. It just seems weird. And Light Client was just like, okay, I don't want to vote for any badge holders because I don't want either to even be a sense that the badge the badge holders would have a conflict of interest. So I thought that all of these, this was extremely interesting to me. And it was also interesting that at the end of the day, someone nominated, not me, I said I didn't do the nomination anymore, but someone nominated, quote, Proto the Machine. And so Proto actually did end up getting 3K worth of public goods funding. So, how do you not fund a pineapple? But anyway, pretty funny that we had a badge holder say, I don't want to be funded, and they got funding anyway. That was a very interesting learning. But the higher meta learning is that fairness is key, right? We need to establish, this is like literal like governmental issues that we are having. We need to be building fair governance systems. That is critical because these are going to be what we use in the future as we use the internet. We want a fair governance system on the internet. So anyway, round 2, phase 2, votes. So it was a 1 week long process. Everyone procrastinated to the last few days, but the cool thing was, like clients, yet again, Superstar organized a public call to go through the nominations. We were not going to have any public calls. However, if they happened not naturally, we weren't going to stop any of them. So we had this public call. We went through every single project nomination. Pretty awesome. And one of the most interesting results is that it was really hard to avoid funding projects proactively, because when you think about it, you're like, oh, I love this project. I want to see it grow. I want to see it evolve. It totally needs funding. And you're like, wait a second. Okay, no. We were catching ourselves in this call saying, hey, no, that doesn't sound very retroactive. Like, you don't want to see that project grow. The important thing is not seeing that project grow. The important thing is establishing the second order incentives that say, if I build valuable projects, valuable public goods, I will be rewarded once they are complete, right? We're not trying to be a grants program. Again, we need to make sure that that separation of concerns is tightly delineated so that people know that they can expect their funding when they get it. Additionally, the definition of public good got a little fuzzy. So we ended up deciding that Etherscan deserved a significant amount of public goods funding. Now, Etherscan is a for-profit, closed source project. They're amazing people, by the way, but that's not like a traditional definition of public goods, right? We're talking open source software. We're like, it's a little weird. So we started having to lean on an idea that actually credit to Will, Asim, and Cal for figuring this out. Oh, by the way, I don't think I'll have time for questions, unfortunately, in case that's the thing. But okay, the fairness ratio, this thing called the fairness ratio, basically it is impact over profit. So what that means is the impact of a project divided by the profit that project received. So if in an example, a for-profit company, maybe they have 100 units of impact and 1,000 units of profit, that's a ratio, a really low ratio. What we want to do is we want to target 1 for all projects. We want value in and value out to be equal. The amount of impact that you have is equal to the amount of profit that you have. That is how we can decide whether or not you should receive public goods funding for the public good. An open source project might get 10,000 units of impact, but then only receive 100 units of profit. So that's also out of balance, right? It's about maintaining fairness and balance. So ideally, we have a 1-to-1 ratio of impact to profit, and that is going to be key. So anyway, we use that. Additionally, we had some other issues with, not super high quality projects being submitted, like Abracadabra, Santa Claus of Cincinnati. That was not the best public goods project. However, we also had some great explanations from the badge holders on why they voted. That was huge, and everyone voted. So that is a big win in and of itself. And so finally, payment and retrospective. We ended up funding $1 million. We funded a bunch of projects. Notably, these projects were mostly technology projects. That is because the badge holders were mostly technology focused. That's an area of an improvement. Also, we didn't really fund projects. We had a very low variance. We may actually want to increase that variance, but pretty good job. Like, these are awesome projects. I'm very happy with how this resulted. So some of the main takeaways: 1, we got to minimize conflict of interest. That is key. Additionally, we probably want to improve this voting mechanism to make that variance a little bigger, really reflect what projects provided what outsized value. And additionally, we want some better project curation. And, we can't have these abracadabra things probably, unfortunately. We also need a little more active participation. We got some, but it was really good that we did, but I think we could do with more. And finally, we're hoping to give a little more guidance on how to think about funding public goods. And this is just the beginning. Remember that the entire point is that second order effect of creating incentives to invest in public goods infrastructure. So this is just the beginning. I am sure that with the infrastructure and that we are building, we will end up funding millions of dollars every day in public goods. And I'm extremely excited about that. So, let's scale Ethereum. Let's align humanity's incentives, make things fair and equitable. So if you build value, you get value. And love knows no borders. Stay optimistic, y'all. That's it.